This is Marketing Uncomplicated. Today's guest is someone who lives at the intersection of creativity, performance, and emotional intelligence, and somehow makes all three feel completely accessible. Jarrod Lopiccolo is the co-founder and CEO of Noble Studios, a global creative digital performance agency trusted by brands like Adobe, Google, and Disney. He's led his team to earn accolades from Inc. and Ad Age, delivered over 100 keynote talks, and helped leaders across industries rethink how they connect with people, not just customers. I love that. But what I love most about the work is this. Jarrod believes the brand strategy isn't a luxury, it's the foundation. And emotional intelligence isn't soft, it's a competitive advantage. So true, guys. Today, we're going to unpack what that actually looks like in the early days of a business, in the messy middle, and in those pivotal moments where connection matters most than conversion. Let's uncomplicate it, guys. How are you? Good to have you on the show, Jarrod.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation today. So, let's dive in.
So I love to set the stage in the beginning. You've
Yep.
built a global agency working with some of the biggest brands in the world. What's the through line, as we talked a little bit about that during our
Yeah.
conversation before we hit record? What is that through line that you see across all high-performing brands, no matter their size?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think one could say, it's a great tagline. You got Nike, just do it. You can get into those things, but I actually think it's a bit deeper, and I do think it starts to center around that emotional intelligence piece, which really is about connection, and it's about meaningful connection. And so, not only do you as a brand need to connect with your customers in a very meaningful, emotional way, but also running a business, right? Me as a leader and as an entrepreneur, like the senior leadership team that I have, that we have very deep, meaningful connections. We know every week we start out with meetings that have segues. We talk about what was good personally and what was good business wise, and we just get closer. We do that with our clients. We do that with our partners. We do that with any stakeholder that works with our firm, as we try to have a deep, meaningful connection. And we actually use that as a filter in a lot of ways to decide who we want to work with and why we want to work with them and what industries we target. And I think that's the same thing when you think of brands, especially today. I think consumers are becoming more and more disenfranchised with institutions and things like that. And so they're wanting to make up for that by having a relationship with a brand, and that brand has to carry similar values and ethos. So naturally brands should have a deep, meaningful connection with their customers as well.
I completely agree. And one of the things that I like to say, when talking to, my clients or really just anybody about marketing, is that it's this age-old saying of product market fit. And we have to get a right product market fit. I'm like, it's really a customer market fit, because you're
Right.
developing an amazing product. That's great. Then you're pushing that into market. That's great. But the market is the customer. And if the customer is not going to respond to the product, then it's really not a product market fit.
That's right.
Yeah. So
I totally agree.
yeah, we need to be thinking about it in the terms of how we're approaching it to the actual audience.
Yeah.
So in your experience, what do entrepreneurs often skip or underdevelop or undervalue sort of the brand strategy in the early stages? Because I think that this stage is super crucial for the jump off, because what I see a lot is backtracking, because this portion really just doesn't get developed, because it's go, 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 get to market.
Yeah, and I think that there's probably a few things to unpack there. I think one of them is, to your point, that go, go, go to market. They're really focused on what they're trying to provide for their customers, as opposed to, I think you need to step back, right, and flip it a little bit to start with why. Why are you existing as a brand? And I think when you start there, then all the products, all the experiences, all the services start to unravel and unfold. And you know your place in the world, right? You know what industries to go after. You know what people to hire. You know what customers will look like. You can build audiences quite quickly. But if you're just selling the what's, right, and that's whether you're a big brand or you're an entrepreneur or you're a tech startup, I think you really have to go to the why. And while it's so simple, many entrepreneurs do not. Many entrepreneurs or leaders, they're just good at one thing. They're a tradesperson of some kind, and they just do more of that, and they create it, and they see a demand in the market, and they start to fill that demand. And the next thing you know, you wake up 5 years from now, and you're sort of lost, right? You're like, wait, I have to start over. I got to look to the why. And when I speak about the why, it's not just why you exist, but it's also the principles. And this is where we unpack it a little bit, because I think the best companies, the ones that last the longest, today at least, are the ones that are purpose driven. They're led by principles. right? You hire and fire based on those principles. You use it as a filter for your clients, right? We at one point created a no asshole clause. And we put it in our SOW, and it was because that was part of our principles, is that we wanted to treat each other with equality, and that we're here to serve each other in both ways. And so I think that's it. I think it's don't start with the what, start with the why, and then dive deep into your principles, because that's how you're going to attract the people that you want to work with.
I love that you bring the no asshole policy, because I'm working actually with a wealth management company, out on the West Coast, and we talk a lot about polite repulsion. So repulsion in the
Mm-hmm.
sense of like the people that we don't want to come through our filter,
Yep.
and it's a go-to to understand the balance between, yes, we are the agency and we are the ones that are going to be taking the clients on, but it's understanding that they're a good fit for us just as much as we're a good fit for them. And it's on both sides, right?
That's
Otherwise,
right.
it's not going to be a fit for either party.
Well, and I think, a lot of when, we started our business 22 years ago, and at that time you wanted to be everything to everyone. Of course we sell that. And I think the world's big enough, population's big enough, there's enough segmentation that you don't need to be everything to everyone. You can find your lane, you can find your customers, and you can have a deeper, meaningful, connected relationship with them, where they repeat purchase from you, whether it's an experience, a product, or a service. And you don't need to widen that base so much. And I think about brands, when they try to be everything to everyone, their brand message gets diluted, right? They all of a sudden they're no longer concentrated, and then they start to feel like they're everyone else in the world. And so I think about, back to your earlier question, about what makes a strong brand. I think consistency and authenticity are those two pieces, right? And so don't wait for perfection to get your tone and messaging and everything out there. Stick with consistency. That will, to a certain degree, beat strategy, if you stay consistent, all the time. Obviously you want to lead with a good strategy, of course, but I think that's also the case, is like, know your audience, speak to them, and be consistent and be authentic, and try to emotionally connect with them, because that ultimately is what drives, that's the tipping point of a purchase, right? We've all had those two products in front of us, or two experiences in front of us. We have to pick one. And if they're all equal, you're going to choose the one that, that sort of, tips that passion meter, or, gets those goosebumps going. And that's where, we all at the end make that purchase with a little bit of emotion. And so the idea, if you can connect with your customers emotionally, then you'll retain them.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, one piece that a lot of people, a lot of companies seem to think that isn't part of the marketing sphere is customer service as well, right? I think
Yes.
that,
Yeah.
for me, I'm somebody that wears glasses, contacts, so on and so forth. As many times as I go places, and buy glasses, or they're like, you can purchase them from us and so on, I go back to when I had contacts. There isn't one time that they haven't
Yeah.
picked up the phone after one ring. Those people, I don't know what they're breathing up there in Utah, because they are the nicest people every time they pick up the phone.
Yep.
They walk me through the process. It's an easy, seamless process, even if I'm changing on something and so on and so forth. But it is just so pleasant consistently, and
Yes.
because of that, even if they are a little bit more expensive, I will go back to them because of the
Yep.
experience that I'm having. And it doesn't set my day off in a bad way. It actually sets it off in a good day when I'm ordering from them, because I always call and I order versus order online.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny. There's so much to unpack on that too,
Yeah.
because, so we started an office in the UK, and one of the things we talked about, which, at the time was a very positive thing, was this American customer service that we do. This is pre-pandemic. And of course we go through pandemic, and some of that customer service got lost, right, and stuff. And we're kind of rebuilding some of that back. But that was a big differentiator. And I remember seeing like an ad over there. It was, what was it? Enterprise, and the car rental company, and it said, Enterprise, same great company with American customer service. And that was a differentiator in that market. And you feel it. You feel when you're not getting good customer service from a brand. And that could be as simple as you go to a restaurant, and believe it or not, more people will go to a restaurant where the food quality isn't that great. Prices are a little bit higher, but the customer service is there, right? They welcome you. They say your name. They got your seat. They know what drink that you drank last time. They want to bring that back. And it's like, all of a sudden you're like, you know what? If the food isn't so great, that's not what keeps me going there. It's the
Yes.
connection of humans, and that full customer service piece. Because at the end of the day, you either like to be served, or you like to serve. And I think those that are in the professional services side of the business do like to serve. They want to, they feel that's part of their role, right? Is to provide a service for someone. And therefore they get a lot out of it when they're happy and they walk away satisfied and they're like, check, feel done. That filled up my cup for the day.
Yeah, for sure. And I always say that, I mean, you know this, right? Being in the industry, but it's you paid X amount for a lead to come in through the funnel. That
Yep.
lead ends up converting, whether it's in B2B or B2C. They have a
Yep.
crappy experience, you lose them. It takes double the amount to gain that
It
same
does.
lead versus, I mean, these are cliches things that I'm saying, but it's true and it's data backed. But at the same time, that's why I feel like a lot of people tend to not consider customer service. And for me, it's an underrated and undervalued piece of the puzzle, because
Yeah.
if people don't get the feeling of feeling valued, no matter what they're buying, restaurant, product, service, um, online, even if it's a bot that you're training and just says,
Yep.
thank you, Sasha, for your purchase on this like beautiful day while you're existing in Miami or whatever the heck it is. The fact that I'm like, oh my God, they know that I'm in Miami because I put in my address, but they recognize that and it was just a silly bot. That's going above and beyond, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of
I
people
yeah, we
don't
will.
tend to put in those finite details.
Well, it's those trust touch points, right? Every interaction you
Yes.
can have with a
Yes.
person or with a brand is a moment to either lose that trust or to gain that or to maintain that trust,
Yes.
right? And you think about like a brand, you think, okay, my worst experience with a brand should be still positive. My best experience with a brand should be positive, and my neutral experience should be positive. And those that lose their customers the quickest, right, are the ones that have a bad experience, brand experience across all three of those, right? It's neutral. You're like, yeah, I'm sort of doing it. Then you have to realize, why am I purchasing from this brand? A lot of times it's out of convenience, or it's the only one that has it, or you're feeling obligated to do it because someone else told you. But if you really have a relationship with that brand, it should be consistent, and those touch points should be consistent across every time you interact with that brand.
Yes,
You know?
absolutely. So let's divert a little bit and talk a little bit about emotional intelligence within business. You
Yeah,
talk about it a lot, anyways, but
I do.
driving. You talk a lot about emotional intelligence driving business results. So what does that actually mean in practice? Walk us through that.
Yeah, well, I think when you surround yourself with your sort of army, right? The people that are going to do the work, right? Whether that's, again, providing a product, a service, you're designing something, and they are really the variable, right? Like, humans are the actual variable. And I oftentimes say, like, well, Martin Luther King, he didn't say, I have a plan. He said, I have a dream. And that part of that emotional connection, right? That emotional intelligence connection will actually bond people so much faster. And because it's leading with authenticity. And at the end, when you think about purchase and trust and all those pieces, that has to be rooted with truth.
Yes.
And so when you lead with emotional intelligence, you actually give a crap about other people, right? And they're, in fact, even customer service, about their experience that they're going to have. So the way I think of life is that I think about that any and every person, there's an opportunity to learn from them, and oftentimes we think about like a Simon Sinek, and he can tell you the three concentric circles and starting with why. If my friend Patrick were to tell me that, and he's kind of like Patrick Star, like from
Yeah.
from SpongeBob, if he told me that, I'd be like, yeah, I'm discrediting you, but if it's coming from Simon Sinek, oh well,
Yeah.
it must be amazing. So I try to remove that bias, and I try to walk around, and interact with humans in an authentic, emotional, connective way. And I truly believe that we have something in common with every single human, right? It's not the 7 degrees of, or whatever it is, 2 degrees of Kevin Bacon, or however that goes. It's literally, I can find a connection between any and every person, even someone I don't politically align with, or someone who has different religious beliefs, or someone that grew up differently than I did. I know we'll find something that we will have a lot of. It might be paella, it might be wine, it might be Disney, it might be movies. And I think if you lead your life that way, then you can actually start to control the narrative on what you want out of that relationship, or how you want to leverage it. Because then you're thinking of a win-win situation all the time, and you're building those deep rooted connections. And so I feel like the team that we have, why we won Ad Age Best Places to Work and Inc. Magazine Best Places to Work, it's because we have that authentic connection with every one of our team members. And we make it a point to not, in fact, we have a rule, like, try not to start the meeting right in the first 5 minutes. Try to take the first 10 minutes, get to know each other. How was your weekend? Be authentic about it, right? We used to, years ago, we would have someone that says, "Yeah, how was your weekend?" And right when someone started talking, they didn't give a shit. They're
Yeah,
just like, "Let's
yeah,
move on. I just did it. I just cashing it in. It's just it's just talking to talk, as opposed to like really genuinely caring about that other individual." And when you do that, now you have an army, right? You have an army of people that are going to lock arms, and they're going to sail in good weather, and they're going to kick ass in bad weather. And that's what you really want, right? At the end of the day, because again, people are the variable. They're behind every product, every innovation, every service, every experience, every purchase. There are humans behind all of that. And we should see them as people. We shouldn't see them as a transactional person on the other end. And so I walk around, I'm kind to everyone. And it's just, I don't know, it feels good, right? It's like something you can control. It's not living in fear. It's not living in the future. It's certainly not living in the past. It's living right in the present. And it's about, making those connections. And when you do that, you just see it. You see it hit the bottom line. People work harder for you. They catch the ball. They when there's a mistake, they own it. They then put a process in place to fix it next time. They're authentic when they communicate that to the client, right? It's just like it goes so far, and it goes into every single, again, touch point. And so we see it in our bottom line. We see it in our retention rate. We see it in our client retention rate. We see it in our recruitment rates of how many people apply for jobs at Noble and things
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
And I think it's part of our DNA at this point, is to have deep, emotional, meaningful connections with other people.
Yeah, I always say in life, life takes a village, right? And I think that even with work or just everything across the board, it really takes a village in the sense of how do we support each other? And if we think about how many hours per day and per year and a month that we spend at the office, I mean, if we're not treating each other well, it's going to
Yeah,
show on the outside, right? And
yeah,
if your internal charter, for example, is not at the place that it needs to be, and all you want to do is talk about what your mission is from an external standpoint, what your vision is from an external standpoint, but what about your internal charter, your
yeah.
internal mission, your internal vision? Because what happens inside translates on the outside.
Very much. Well, it is. It's because at the end of the day, we're sort of a hive, right? Humans are like, we can feel when things are off, and so I think one of the most important parts of of a leader of a group, whether you're an entrepreneur or a leader of a company, is to lead with those principles, lead with those values, but model the behavior, right? I oftentimes tell myself, I want to be the leader that I would follow, right? And that's hard because you got to like step back, you got to look third person and say, well, who would I want to follow? I'd want to follow someone who prioritizes family just as much as business, right? Prioritize friendships just as much as workmates, right? Prioritizes profit just as much as downtime, right? And all these different dualities. And so I think about that, and I then try to model that behavior, and then ultimately it becomes who I am, and you can see it permeating inside and outside the industry, whether I'm talking at conferences or I'm meeting new people for the very first time. And I think that, like, if you're going to get into business, right, and you're going to be a leader, I think this is what's required today. It's no longer about profits, right? It's about progress, and it's no longer about competition. It's about cooperation, and it's about work-life balance, and it's about allowing team members to bring their whole selves to work. And if you're not cut out to be that emotionally intelligent, then you're probably not going to survive as a leader, because the people need more from leaders than they ever have before.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. Completely agree. So, how does emotional intelligence show up in marketing specifically, from messaging to customer experience?
Yeah. So obviously we have a great team that does a lot of this work and stuff, but we often joke, we call ROI return on inspiration, right? That's a
Love
way
that.
for, right. It's cool. That's BC's our not only partner, but creative chief creative officer at
Yeah,
Noble.
yeah.
And a lot of that came from this idea that, like, we're not just doing it to get our clients, our clients, aka brands, to sell more purchases or experiences or whatever. We really do want to have that authentic connection. And so we talk about, like, one of the other ROIs is goosebumps, right? Did that move the needle for you, right? Did that, like, make you want to have a connection, or did it remind you of something, or did it make you feel nostalgic? And so I think about that, part. It's not, yes, people do want to know price, and they want to know shipping, and they want to know, ratings and all these other things. But at the end of the day, they also want to, the products they purchase, the experiences they have, the services they engage with is also a reflection of them as a character, as a brand themselves, right? We all have our own individual brands. And so you ultimately want to be able to say, I support all of these different brands. I'm a Canon photographer. I support Canon. Like, I want to make sure that I have emotional connection with that, a piece of equipment, because it's an extension of my own brand. And I think when we craft, campaigns, obviously we get really targeted. We understand who our audiences are, and we know what drives them, right? So like an example, we represent Visit Lake Tahoe, large lake large glacier lake. It actually brings in more visitors than Yellowstone, Grand Canyon, and Yosemite
Amazing. Yeah.
combined
Yeah.
in a year, right? Just massive. And what we thought was we needed to have emotional connection with them. So we developed this, what we call the sustainable audience. And it was people that either leaned into sustainability in that they recycled, or they had electric vehicles, or had intent to purchase electric vehicles. They cared about outdoor activity. They, focused more on health. And then we targeted them with emotional ads, right? Where, it was them with their kids on a paddleboard doing a yoga, session or a meditation, or there was this hike, and we just make sure to place the right proper family, so that we knew that, they were going to have an emotional connection with that. And then the messaging that we craft and stuff. So all of it is still selling. At the end of the day, we're still selling heads to beds, visitors into market, but we did it in a very emotional, connective way. And then, of course, we're educating them when they come into market, teaching them how to park with heart, right? Instead of just parking anywhere on the side of the road. And if you've ever been to Tahoe, people just park anywhere,
Yeah.
or, pick up the trail, or pick up after your dog. And so we have all these little clever sayings. And we actually won just recently, like an Adrian Award for that sort of emotional connection, because we bonded both the visitors that were coming into market and also the locals, right? The locals that are experiencing over tourism. They're like, I need these visitors to pick up their dog poop, or this, that, and the other. And so we're able to actually then follow them into market, right? Follow them into this market and see that they emotionally connected with more visitors. They stayed longer in market. They spent more into market. But all of it started first with like identifying what their values are and how do we emotionally connect with them, showing them whether it's pictures or imagery or slogans or whatnot. And it's working. It's absolutely working, So yeah, so I definitely think you've got to lead. You've got to have all the other stuff. The other stuff is table stakes: price, shipping, reviews, all that other crap. Need to have it. Then you got to layer on the emotional side, because that's what's going to tip them.
I really love this. I mean, I don't think I have come across another agency that really focuses on this. And I think, as you obviously know, it's your differentiating factor in terms
It
of
is.
what you guys deliver for your clients, and the creative and really the messaging and everything that you build for the clientele across the board. I'm on, probably 100+ interviews right now on my podcast, and I've spoken to a lot of agencies, and this is the first time I've ever heard, emotional intelligence in business.
Well, I love that. Thank you for that. I appreciate the validation, because I also need that, right? That's part of
Yeah.
my love language, is like, validate me, please. I'm working my ass off, but no, I think part of it is when, because my wife and I started the business, and we tried to start it with family values, but without the nepotism of family, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
I always say, like, some of the most like successful businesses are family owned, and some of the worst businesses are family owned. So you have this big, huge, spectrum. But I think when we created the company with the name Noble, we really created it so that it was a core value for us. So it just built into the name. Like, so if ever we get off track, we're like, well, what's the noble thing to do? And right, as marketers, we can manipulate, right? We can put
For
messages
sure.
in front of people. I mean, we see it with what's happened politically, right? No matter what side you sit on, media has definitely created a bigger divide, because they can target people. They can get
Yes.
right into their homes and into their phones and into their tablets. And so we just thought, if we're
Well,
going to
I
create
mean,
a
even
business,
down to
yeah,
messaging, it's swaying of the language
yes,
that you use. It's heartstring pulling. Whatever it
yes.
is, right? So
And so we have this power, right, as like marketers, to work behind the scenes and put stuff in front of people. And I think we have a responsibility to do that. And so I think that that's one of the reasons why we've led so much with that emotional intelligence, the core values. The core value in the name is because we feel like we need to change a bit. We need to actually get people to connect authentically with brands. We're going to continue to shop. We're going to continue to purchase. So let's make those, experiences be the best they can possibly be, the most relevant, personally relevant it can be as well, as opposed to like, if you're searching for a Mexico trip, I can interrupt that and show you Tahiti,
Yeah.
and I can get you over to Tahiti, but maybe Mexico is important because you wanted that authentic connection. You love tacos. You have a cousin that goes there goes to Cabo so we have a responsibility to like guide people, to what they need and also what they want, but try not to manipulate it in that process.
Yeah.
And therefore I think we do have a great reason. I mean, it's the reason why we have a long standing clients is they we hit the performance, but we're also doing it in a very, non-cliche, noble way.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, can you share a moment then where emotional intelligence shifted the direction or outcome of a brand that you were working with?
That's great. We just finished this this docu series actually, and it's with Travel Nevada, and so we represent the state, all the tourism for the state of Nevada, and one of the perceptions was that Nevada is either Las Vegas, or it's Reno, and yet there are so many amazing, wonderful stories to be told of the rural areas of Nevada, right? So the Elkos and the Ely's and the Tonopahs, and where really the grit of Nevada still exists and the culture is still there, right? I mean, I went to architecture school in Vegas, and the average occupancy of a resident was only 2 years, right? So it's a very transient place, but this is where the culture exists in this area. So we wanted to authentically connect. Well, they're also, there's a bit of biasness because they're like, you know what, we're not Vegas, we're not Reno, you guys don't care about us. But in reality, that's where the culture is of Nevada still lives, right? The cowboy poetry up in Elko, or the rock hounds, and what they do and making cool jewelry down in Tonopah. So long story short, we tapped into Alex Honnold, who's the guy who climbed and did free solo, climbed El Cap without ropes.
Yeah.
He happens to live in Vegas as a resident, and we thought, how do we? Because he's such an empath. He has he's just so emotionally present that we thought, what if we brought him to come into these rural areas of Nevada and tell some of that Nevada story that exists there while he's experiencing this visitor experiences that others would have if they left Vegas for just a day or Reno for a day or two. And so anyway, we got this crew together, and it's probably 50 people, and we just went around for I think about 15 days straight, just filming all these authentic, connected experiences that he had, and how he can emotionally either say, I don't believe in ghosts, and have a fun thing there, or gets freaked out about the clown museum that is in Tonopah, which is really weird. And or go to Area 51 and he says he doesn't believe in aliens, but then you get this unpack. And so I guess all I'm saying is that we were able to leverage this problem that the state had, of trying to get visitors out of these major sort of metropolitan areas and get them, show the visitors that they can actually have this deeper, authentic experience. And we use someone who's a high empath to actually storytell along the way. And we're getting ready to launch the series, and I think next week the trailer goes live, and then we'll be pitching it to Netflix and Hulu and all of that. And it's just super cool. But I think part of it is just we could have done it in a very different way. We could have brought in influencers, AKA creators, who don't know shit about, Nevada, and, and they're just doing selfies the whole time. And there's a place for it. We use them all the time, but this was we needed a deeper, meaningful connection that needed to happen here. Agreed. And so we did, we unpacked it, and there's just so many great lines and so many great nuggets. And, you just look at it, you're like, this is telling the story, the authentic story of Nevada, using a real human that wasn't scripted, and took him a couple weeks. It was 2 weeks, but it took 2 days to kind of warm him up, because he was like, what are we doing exactly? And we didn't want to show him and stuff. So we wanted to be very real. We wanted all of his reactions to be real, again, that authentic, that emotional side. We wanted people, we wanted to hear his first reaction for something, or when he first saw something, as opposed to have it be say it again, say it with a little bit more punch. Yeah. And that's what I hate about these marketing agencies. A lot of them just cash it in. They're like, no, say that line one more time, but say it this way. It's it's so much better if you can just get it the first time and have it be real,
Sure.
So that was a great example. Yeah. We just finished it. We just finished the series.
I love that. And thank you for saying, obviously we love the influencers. We think that they have really great impact. And,
they do.
I've worked with some clients where influencers are, some of the best angles of marketing, but it has its place.
It has its place. It absolutely does. Yeah. And they're amazing. I mean, they literally are better content creators than most of us in the marketing world because they're just doing it at a
Sure.
high clip, and they're doing it off usually raw, right? Up from a phone, or maybe just a small camera, but they're not using massive, there's not a 15-person
Production.
crew.
Yeah.
Yeah, production side of it. But they can lose their authenticity quite quickly. And that's where you've got to like, they've just, I don't know, there's this, I think there's going to be a movement that we see, especially with AI and that pendulum swing
Yeah.
of people and anyone can be able to create B-roll and, this kind of stuff. I think we're going to find more and more, you're going to have to say, well, how are you not only an influencer and a creator, but how are you having an authentic experience, whether it's at a cafe or with that product or at this location? It's
Yes.
got to be real. Otherwise,
Yes.
I think people are going to just toss it,
Yep. Yep.
especially with the volume of production and content that's coming out these days. It has to be real.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So let's move into, building a strong foundation. Many founders think brand strategy equals logo, colors, and fonts,
Right.
and, all of the soft part of, the beginning of marketing. But talk to me a little bit about your angle in terms of what's the real starting point and how you guys see it at Noble.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. I think each company has a purpose in the world, and we have to identify that why. And I think once we have the why, then we start. Of course, we go through and we do brand strategy listening sessions, and we do stakeholder interviews, and we do quantitative and qualitative research to help back all those things up. But at the end, it does come down to you're serving a specific audience, like and I mean, I think the Walmarts of the world, those are going to be really hard to build these days. I think those are sort of the anchor companies that are here. I think we're going to find is the companies that do get created today are the ones that are filling these sort of niche gaps, and are potent, right? They come with something that they can do better than anybody else. And I would even say if I were to start an agency over today, I would probably be a lot more pointed and a lot more focused. And so we try to draw that out of each one of our clients, and of course we did that with ourselves. Once you have that, each client does need to have a set of principles, whether they put those out into the world or they just use it for internal, reasoning. I think today more than ever, brands need to have that level of personality, that depth of like, how far will they push themselves? Like, how far will they create something, or how far will they, extend their services? And a lot of times their principles help, rein them in. And I talked earlier about like, what's the noble thing to do. There's been occasions where all of a sudden there's a fringe industry that wants to work with us, whether it's in maybe tobacco or, something like that. We're like, well, I'm not anti-tobacco, but I don't know if my team wants to work on tobacco. And we use our filters, right? We use our principles as filters for going into that industry. And I think that people do need to do the same. Brands need to do the same thing in terms of filtering what products they're going to create, right? If you're creating a product and you're touting about clean renewable energy, but you have a massive carbon footprint, that's not going to align well,
Yeah.
right? That's
Yeah.
like that's not, you're going to create confusion in the market, and there's going to be a very small subset of people that will then maybe either miss that or think it's okay. And so I think that brands do need to lead with some level of principles and values. It doesn't mean you have to be political, but I just think, again, back to what humans are missing a bit right now is this attachment to something that they trust.
Yes.
And the more that you have principles, the more that people will be able to attach not just to the products you create, like Patagonia, or like they great products. They got the 1% give back. They do lean a little political. So, if you don't align with that, that might be a turnoff, but their return policy is great. How they serve the planet, how they want to repair their stuff. It's like, those are principles they have that I align with, right? And so I'm going to buy more from them than I'm going to buy from others. And so when we go through this brand strategy and exercise, we really try to draw out those principles outside of who they are, what's their mission, what's their vision, what's their tagline. And then to your point, all those sort of like all those touch points, the mark, right? The iconography, the color palettes, the image sets, right? We're working with a great client of ours, Sirius XM, and there's very specific images we can use, and there's ones we can't use based on who their target audiences are. And it's not just meaning like gender, it just might be like reveal, or it might be in a place, right? They don't necessarily want to have everyone have headphones on,
Yes.
because they want to be a little bit more expansive because they do a lot of podcasting. And so there's, every brand has all their touch points that you need to then think about.
Yes.
And the best brands really do consider all those pieces and understand exactly what clients are looking for, what their customers are looking for. And those that can do that can pull it off, do really well.
Yes, totally. I love everything that you just said, and and I almost was like, I want to go through that process.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
If a small business owner is listening and says, I need to strengthen my brand, where should I focus in the next 30 days? What would your high level advice be?
Yeah. It's really good. I think about this often. Like, I feel like positioning is probably the most important thing. Like if someone comes to your site or your ad or your wherever, a touch point, I think you need to be really clear about your positioning. So they shouldn't read some fluff, right? And it sounds real consultant. Like it needs to feel like I know that's me. Yep, you just solved my problem. I'm exactly that person, and I need that exact thing, experience, product, service, or whatever. And I think that I mean, I would love to say start with the why,
Yeah.
like why do you exist, and start with principles. But in minimum, start with your positioning, so that when your audience, and write that down, it's Sarah, she's 34, she has a household income as this, and she likes these tactics, and she buys these things. Therefore, that's my target audience. When Sarah arrives at your website or wherever that touch point is, make sure that positioning reads to that person,
Yeah.
and if that's the most minimum you can do, you'll be more successful. Because while and this is tough because everybody wants to be everything to everyone, but you're going to be so much better if you can just say, this is my audience, and I'm only going to talk to Sarah or Joe or whoever it is, and I'm going to just be 100% to them versus 10% to them and 10% to everybody else. You're going to get better loyalty, better purchases, better returns on investment, better repeat visitors. They're going to tell more people, right, positive things about you. It's just going to go so much longer. So focus on your positioning statement.
I like that because I also say clarity as well, because I don't know how many times clients like to beat a dead horse when it comes to that made headline. And I
Yes.
always say, if you sell bikes, tell people you sell bikes, not the wind that
Yeah.
blows through their hair, because nobody's going to care about that, right?
Right. Right.
So it's just stating what you do from that standpoint
Yeah.
of positioning, and I completely agree. I agree.
Well, yeah, we have a pretty decent sales and marketing engine at Noble, so we generate a lot of leads, and you'd be so like amazed at how many times because people come to us because they need help, right? They're saying,
Yes.
hey, we need help with brand, or we need help with the advertising campaign or websites or whatever, and we go to their site, and right away we're like, what the hell do they do?
Yeah.
And if it takes us a long time to figure that shit out, and we do this for a living, you can imagine the confusion you're putting out there in the world for others, right? And so it's like, so
So
yeah,
much, so much.
right.
And it's like, even it's in more often than not, guys, for those of you listening, enterprise
Yes.
companies do this mistake consistently,
Oh,
all the
yes.
time, all the time.
All the time. Yeah, it's so hard to figure it out. And it's like,
Yeah,
so then you use ChatGPT and say, what the hell do they do? Who are their competitors? Da da da. And it's just funny. I mean, it's not funny. It's just, I understand it. You don't want to turn off people, but at the cost of being so vague, right? You don't then attract anyone.
sure.
And, so it's like, pick one or the other. I'd rather have a smaller pool of highly concentrated, highly loyal customers than a large pool of like first time purchasers and just totally like, yeah, watered down, and I can never reach them again.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. I love it. What small businesses often feel pressure to keep up, specifically now with,
Yeah,
AI, and just it's just getting louder out there.
it
And the
is.
digital trends are, it's almost like, you know, clients and brand owners and everybody was, okay, I really just don't even understand the landscape of marketing, but now it's, I don't really even know where to begin because there's so many things coming at me. And I just launched, one of my clients who is a solo wealth management firm out in Chicago, and he's like, Sasha, he's like, the second I put out in the world that I had an LLC, he's like, I'm just getting all these crazy
Yeah.
phone calls. You need to be doing this, you need to be doing that, and so on and so forth. He's like, it's nuts. And I said, absolutely, and it's overwhelming. But how do you feel they should think about balancing performance marketing with human connection?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it depends on what you're offering, right? If you're selling something and your audience is the world, then yeah, you're going to have to get really savvy when it comes to marketing, right? You're going to have to think about a lot of inbound. You got to interrupt. You got to speak within pain points to people, and you got to build blog articles. You got to build basically a huge content engine,
Yep,
right?
yep.
If your world is the audience, but if you're more hyper local, like geo targeted, right? Say I'm in Reno Tahoe, and I'm a restaurant. Well, we know you don't have to talk to people in New York, right? You really need to be talking to people here. So I think first it needs to start with that distinction. Who is your audience? Not who do you want to be your audience, but who's your likely audience, right? If you're a chiropractor or a small business like that, or a small professional service, or even a local bank, you have a catchment area of people. And at that point, you need to like start to interrupt people's daily activities, right? Whether it could be billboards. I mean, I'm not a massive fan of billboards, but they work if you're selling something local. You see a lot of car dealerships doing that. There's radio, of course. But then there's also just like the Google side of it, right? The hyper local local indexing and making sure you have a lot of reviews set up on Google, because reviews help the algorithm prioritize you up to the top. And they make it really easy for you to get those reviews. You just got to do the work to actually ask those happy customers to get those reviews. But I think it really does come down to like the idea of like, are you targeting the entire world, and you're selling Nike shoes, or are you targeting like a specific geo? And both of those tactics, are different. But I will say, regardless, and I go back to this every time, make it emotional, make it, connect with those people that are in that market, speak to those pain points, like show that you've been through that, or you know how to solve those problems, or that you're the solution to what their issues are.
Yeah.
I think that when you show up helpful, you get opportunity. I always say, like, if you ask for advice, you get opportunity. If you ask for opportunity, you usually get advice, right? And you can substitute that with money or services or whatever you want. And so be helpful. And then the last thing I'll say is that, and I would ask anyone that is listening, look at where your business is coming from. Oftentimes you have a sphere of influence, right? It's a second or third degree people. It's usually geographical as well. Like if you even take your LinkedIn, you can run it through some third-party software and you can actually see by location how many connections. And I've got, close to 15,000. Most of those are close in the US, right? But then they start to span in other countries and things like that. And it's mostly on the West Coast. So you'd be surprised, like actually your sphere of influence is oftentimes where you spend the most amount of your physical time. And so therefore leverage that, like leverage the people that are around you, leverage the referrals that you can get around you, especially if you're starting and you're on low budget, be helpful, and the best way too is to make a friend. I always say is to listen as opposed to talk, even though I talk a lot.
Yeah.
So.
You drop some amazing pieces of information. So talk away and don't stop talking.
I know. Be careful. I use my hands.
That's
too.
more validation for you as well.
Yay! Oh, cup is full. Cup is full again.
Exactly.
No, thank you.
No, totally. You have a lot of good stuff to say. So just keep at it, because people need to be hearing about this, and it is the way you distinctly set yourself apart in terms of how you guys really navigate this landscape is super interesting, because everybody else is just doing something cookie cutter and it's not coming out right.
Yeah. Well, I go back to, people want to do business with people that they like, right? And that they have an attraction towards, and, where you have chemistry.
Yes.
And so that's part of us too. And we're going in for a pitch for business. It's really, we're going to show up with all those other things, those table stakes stuff, right? Like here's how many awards we won. Here's the industries, here's testimonials, here's case studies. Great. Next is find a connection, right? And when you build that chemistry, it actually stays for a very, very, very long time. And that's what I kind of love about being in business for 22 years is that it's just compounded. I have this amazing network of great people, great humans that we all have something in common around. And I think that's the best way to do business. And if you do that, I promise you we wouldn't be in business for 22 years had we not been profitable, right? And so it works. Now, are you going to get 40% profit? No, probably not. Go into software if you want that, but if you're going to be in professional services, you do operate a little bit less on margins, but man, we could stay around for a long time and we can have these great case study, great moments, great experiences. And that's what I feel like life's about is building more human connections and being real and authentic and always learning and, those kinds of things.
Yeah, I completely agree. I love it. What's the most surprising insight you've learned about customer behavior that entrepreneurs often miss?
It's interesting. So entrepreneurs in particular, we negotiate a lot with ourselves. We have to, right? When you start a business, you're like, am I in demand? Am I not in demand? Do I have this? Is it working? Is it not? And you also have to look, in the future. And I think what I see a lot of entrepreneurs doing is just taking their negotiations that they have with themselves and making that a playbook. as opposed to actually getting feedback from customers. And I would say so oftentimes you got it, you've attracted that customer, but they came to you different than why you felt. And so I feel like the feedback loop for entrepreneurs, because let's be clear, if you're an entrepreneur, you're likely a little crazy, right? And you know, and you oftentimes, not in a bad way, but there's an ego that exists there, right? And the more that you can be egoless and be an ego for everyone, the better. And so oftentimes when an entrepreneur gets a customer, they're like, I know why I got it. I did these 3 things and it worked out. But in reality, it might be a different thing as to why you actually landed that customer or
Yeah.
that client or that brand. And so I think it's always about keeping your knees bent and listening and seeking that feedback, because that takes the negotiation that we do with ourselves away, and it puts you into actually full reality, right? And so oftentimes when you actually seek that feedback, whether it's from customers, whether it's from clients, whether it's from friends or coworkers, or anything like that, you're slightly off, and that makes you a better, because you've gotten feedback you would have never thought was the real reason. So I think that we see that often too with brands, is that they're like, well, this is our audience, they want this, and we got it to them and they purchased it. It's like, yeah, but let's actually go into why they purchased it. What was the intent of that purchase? And you might find, oh my gosh, we're targeting that person, but actually they're buying it for 4 other people or for someone
Mm-hmm,
else,
mm-hmm,
or
mm-hmm.
that experience. Yes, we got them, but the reason why they're having that experience is because of this reason, not that reason. And so I feel like we're not curious enough post transaction, right, to get that feedback. And because when we get that, that's the gold, right? That's when you're like, oh my gosh, that oftentimes when we get that feedback, it opens up new service lines, it opens up new channels, new marketing strategies, new taglines, new ways of connecting with people. And so, yeah, I would say that piece of being curious and asking for feedback, because oftentimes entrepreneurs or leaders, we negotiate too much with ourselves, and we often think we know why we won the game, and sometimes it's different.
Yeah, very true. I love the ego play there.
Yeah,
So, just as we close out here, looking ahead, AI, digital acceleration, changing consumer
yeah.
expectations, what shift do you think will most matter for brands over the next 5 years?
Well, so I'm very pro AI. We actually brought in a head of AI strategy into our company. And believe it or not, you would think this person is almost like a new CTO, and so you'd put it in like the development or engineering. But we actually brought this person right into our operations because we wanted to
Love
lead
it.
right. Seriously, we were looking at. We said, well, why we want to adopt AI? Yes, for efficiency, but more to be effective, and ultimately we want human plus AI, right? We want to make sure we always maintain that human creativity and so I think as brands, continue to adopt AI, build LMs, build data lakes, build custom GPTs, all that's going to be good it's good, and you should do it. You have to do it. That's going to give you some insights. But then what you do with the insights, it has to go back to this same age, old, way. It's just, you got to emotionally connect with people. And I think people are going to crave it more and more, the more that as they say, AI slop, goes out there, the more that you smell these AI signals, right? I'm so sad that fucking AI killed the M dash. It's like, it's gone now. It's like and like to the point where, like, if you're, and I would ask anyone who's writing, if they're just pulling shit out of ChatGPT and throwing it in an email, be careful, because if it has more than 3 M dashes, everyone knows you use ChatGPT to do that. And so, and there's going to be more and more signals, right? When all of a sudden it's this soulless voice and it doesn't say I or we or us, and it's not something personal. There's no like personal story there. It's just framework based. I feel that I think customers are going to retreat away from brands that are going to do that. So I think as companies go into the future, they need to adopt AI to stay relevant, to be effective, but then they have to lean even harder into the human part, because with so much noise out there, and all of us can be our own creators at such high volume, you've got to lead with your own experience. You got to lead with your own emotions, your own principles, your own values, and then that of the companies.
Yeah, I love it. I do, and every time I do talk about, where AI is going, I do really feel that as much as it's pushing and advancing forward with a lot of things, I feel that it's going to retreat us back to
Yeah.
a lot of things that were before the .com, and as we were talking about, and all of that. But it's interesting. It's interesting, this sort of juxtaposed, drive that's happening in this double-edged sword, because it is great in one hand, but it it's taken out a lot of the authenticity. But I think we're going to be
Yeah.
craving more of that as we move forward.
You're absolutely right. I mean, we're seeing it already, and just some of the, we always say, right, what you measure is what you improve. We're seeing in all the measurements is that the more that we lead with authenticity and human connection, the more engagement that those ads or those blogs or whatever gets. I mean, my daughter just went off to university, and she got out of social. She's like, I'm just doom scrolling, and all I'm watching is these memes, and it's just, she's like, I want to have more authentic connections with
Yeah.
college students and stuff, and like, she's not the only one. Like, her boyfriend and her roommate and two other friends, they're all off social right now, and it wasn't like a big push. It wasn't like, let's do it for a month, and it's like, no, they don't want to be on it because they're not getting that emotional connection that we all crave as humans. I mean, we that's just why we exist, is to dance, to play, to eat, to, you know what I mean, to high five, to laugh, to be sad, like, to be emotional. We can't lose that in our marketing.
Yeah, I love that they did that. Good for them in
Yeah.
that sense. I mean, it's just it's this. There's something to learn from the generations after us, and in terms of
Oh yeah.
how they live and how they exist. So congratulations to her.
Well, I know it got me about, thank you. It was like 2 years ago when our son went to, a college party. He's a few years older, and he said, "Yeah, it was great. They had the phone back. Everyone threw their phones in. No one was allowed to take photos of the party." And like, well, what was going on at the party? He's like, actually, nothing.
Yeah,
Just like hanging out, shooting the shit on the couch. You know what I mean? Like playing ping pong. And yeah, there was drinking, of course. Like, but it wasn't like we weren't hiding the phones. It was just because they wanted whoever was going to be there to have a deeper connection at that event. And I think that the more that we swing towards frameworks and automations and LMs and data lakes and all this other stuff, I think the more that we're going to crave that experience. And maybe it's one of the reasons why there was so much travel that happened just this last week with with Thanksgiving and everything else.
yeah,
Maybe that's because people want to be around more family,
more
and they
family.
want that nostalgia
Yeah,
again.
yeah, I love it. I love it. There's always a silver lining in everything. So yeah,
There is, yep, yeah. And I subscribe to the glasses half full as opposed to empty. But I oftentimes say the beer is half full
yeah.
because you can still get a slight buzz from a beer if you have a half a beer.
I
So
love it.
there's a positive there. Yeah. So
Jarrod, this has
yeah,
been so much fun, truly.
yeah,
Um,
same.
but I'm not going to let you go, because
No,
we
please don't.
we
No, let's keep going. No.
we do this thing of, where we ask you one habit, one word, and one myth. So whatever comes to mind, just fire
Okay.
away. So one word to describe the future of brand building.
One word to describe. I'm going to say trust. I was going to say authenticity, but I think trust is going to be we're experiencing a lot of antitrust right now in
Yeah,
anything, and so I think brands are going to need to lead with so much trust and transparency and all those pieces. But I would say trust is probably the most important.
I love it. One habit entrepreneurs should adopt today to build stronger customer relationships.
One habit, I would say, to if any of your clients or your partners or anyone comes to mind, in that moment in time, you should reach out to them. And I do this when I travel. If I think of someone when I'm traveling, I see something, I buy it for that person, not because I go travel and I say I have a list, I got to get something for grandma and mom and
Because it
dad and
came
everything
to
else. It's
you.
just it just came to me, and so I would say, if you are thinking about your client in some way or another, it just pops in your head, send that signal out there, right? Show that connection, because you never know if you're going to be here tomorrow. You never know if they're going to be here tomorrow, and it would be a wasted moment. And that also builds an authentic connect, because it's real, it's raw. Don't do it right before renewal or right before the big pitch because it feels unauthentic. Do it because they come to mind, and that'll help keep and maintain
I'm going
relationships.
to take that away, and I'm going to do that. Thank you for
You
that.
should, yeah.
One myth about branding you wish we would all finally let go of.
Hmm. These are good questions. Um, Gosh, that's a good one. I think, well, I'll tell you where my head went originally was, there's this tension between performance and brand. And I think that brand only attracts net new, right? As opposed to like solidify the existing base that you have and stuff. Because I think people think of brand as like opening that awareness, and then performance is really about closing the lower funnel. And I think that myth of like brand is only about awareness, I think is a myth. I think it's actually like it's about, yes, awareness, but it's also about conversion. It's about repeat customers. It's about advocacy. It's about all those pieces. And so I think to kind of, not think it's only about awareness or trying to widen the upper part of the funnel.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Jarrod, thank you. Honestly,
Yeah.
it's been so much fun. I appreciate your time and really all of your juicy nuggets on this podcast, and a lot of things to take away and learn from today.
Well, listen, you're a great host. It was very conversational. So I really appreciate that, because I think that's the best way that we either learn or we communicate, and just realize that everyone has taught me this stuff along the way as well. Right. So I'm glad that if there's anything, if any of the listeners out there can pull anything, even just one thing, then I've done a good deed for the day. And whoever I stole or leveraged that from will be thankful. They'll hopefully their ears are ringing, So
Thank you so
yeah.
much.
Well, thank you.